Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about English royal weddings and the kind of customs, traditions, and purposes of it, what goes into a royal wedding, how it changed from medieval times to modern times, because they have very different meanings. And I think an appropriate way to start it off is to go to the arrangement of these weddings. Basically, whenever two royals wanted to be married, it was usually because of power or treaties to prevent wars, and very often they did not love each other or know each other at all, and at these weddings was the very first time where they actually met and saw and actually got to communicate with one another. Sometimes they wouldn't even know the other's language. Now in medieval times it was very stressful and very important for two certain people to get married, but modern day, not as much. A good example of that is Prince Philip. He was actually exiled from the country Queen Elizabeth was ruling, and they married frankly out of love, not for power, status, or relationship. So there's that flip. Surprisingly, if it was two royals marrying, like with Henry I and Matilda of Scotland, they had very equal, similar powers to one another because they both came from a pretty powerful and rich country in which they used their powers in tandem to take down other kingdoms or other nations to better both of their own countries. Now, if you were a commoner marrying a royal, it would change depending on if you married a king or a queen, because if you married a king, you would become a queen consort, and sometimes you would stick around long enough to become the queen regent, which is like the actual queen, and with a queen's marriage, you just become a prince, like modern day Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth. Prince Philip never became an actual king. He just was a consort or a regent. Now, these consorts weren't just throwaway people. They did have real power within the kingdom, and they were respected as if they were the king or the queen at the time. Now, the word consort has grown down in popularity as King Charles III has officially called his wife Queen Camilla instead of Consort Camilla, and the modern English royal family is starting to bring down those sort of diminishing titles towards their spouses. Now let's move on to something a little more exciting. Here we have Windsor Chapel in St. George. Prince Henry married here. It was founded by one of the first English kings, King Edward, founded in 1327, and is the moniker of English weddings and of the royal wedding process. King Edward funded this thing himself because he felt the need to be married at his own church, and furthermore, every royal child after him. Every wedding, every funeral, every party, every ceremony that the royal family takes part in is held at the Windsor Castle. So not only is it where all marital traditions are held, but it is also a beautiful castle that stands as a symbol of the royal blood and their legacy. If you still don't believe how important Windsor Castle is to the royal family, here is just some of the people held in its mausoleum. Henry VIII, George V, Queen Mary. Every royal that will live and have lived will die in this place. During medieval times, boys were often arranged a marriage between 20 to 24, as young as 14 if they couldn't find their own wife. Marriage was often seen as a rite of passage for these boys to become men, as they would be keeping the lineage alive. On the other hand, girls were arranged marriages as young as 12 or even under, but the average age they would marry off to was 20. Now, when they get married, they were often used as a peace offering between nations. All these weddings involving the prince and princesses were arranged by the reigning king or queen, and some were cruel because if the kids didn't want to marry, they couldn't say no, or some of them would face a charge of treason. Marriage ceremonies are where the real fun is at. The last royal family weddings were estimated at a cost of around $52 million US. And on that $52 million, on the cake alone, they spent $80,000. But it's nothing compared to the dress in the photo, which is priced at $1.6 million. Weddings are very lavish and very extra, with a lot of people attending. Those people include immediate family, dignitaries, which would be some kind of prince or a general, foreign royalty, and leaders of a nation, and some celebrity guests are invited to the royal weddings. The average attendance counts for 600 to 1,800 people in total over the last 2 decades. A bride's dress has an important role to play when it comes to the history of royal weddings, as of today and the past. A dress was not only something to look nice in, but to represent class and status. If a bride's dress had even a slight deviance in its appearance, it was seen as rude and a stain on the family image. Another part of the royal weddings were the crowning ceremonies. Now, Prince Henry didn't have one, but it was where the reigning king would come down from his throne wherever to the marriage, and as if dubbing a knight, he would place the crown on the prince, signifying the change and acceptance of a new ruler. Here we have some royal don'ts at a wedding, and some you might not think of is the food they serve. Garlic and shellfish, for example, are called undignified for their odor, and they also had rules against wearing hats because it was seen as undignified. Other rules are like casual marriage, don't wear white, don't show any cleavage, be respectful to families. However, the punishment for breaking these rules were not so forgiving. As of modern day, they aren't carried out anymore, but some of the punishment included being branded with a cast iron for your stupidity, or being fined a large sum as much as the king deems. And there was also a threat of loss of status for infringing, leaving you a peasant, which was basically a death sentence for the time. In the unfortunate death of a monarch, a few things would happen. One, the status of the spouse would change, and two, if no spouse was there, who would claim the throne? Now, English tradition already has a line of succession. They go from the firstborn son to the youngest-born son to the firstborn daughter to the youngest-born daughter. If they have no children, then it goes to high-ranking officials who the family trusts. Now, in the case that you were a consort, if you were a prince consort, you are now the king of the nation and referred to as the king or king consort. For the women, they weren't as lucky, as they are now called a queen dowager, which means widowed. They are still respected and treated as royals, but hold no political or constitutional power, and they're usually just there as a stand-in. Now, thank you for watching. I hope you learned a lot about English traditions and weddings, and I'll see you guys next time, and I hope this was informational. I had a lot of fun making this, and it was a great experience. Thank you.